Hello everyone, this is Chaim Durst, the Wordmuse. Today I'd like to talk about how to prepare. What's the pre-work that you need to do before you start your essay? This is a question that was recently asked to me by a parent, so I wanted to address this in more depth here. Well, the first thing you need to do to prepare is be open-minded. Do not be married to one topic. Oftentimes students who come to me for the first session have already made up their mind. I'm going to write about tennis. I'm going to write about chess. And I have to spend the whole first session convincing them that there may be other topics that reveal more about their identity. So please have an open mind. If you have tunnel vision, it is likely that your essay will suffer. Secondly, you have to be willing to look at yourself honestly. This is an internal adventure of self-exploration. So be willing to be vulnerable to yourself and ideally to a mentor who is working with you so that you can relax and start looking at your internal world. Think of yourself as someone who's a cartographer who's exploring a continent for the first time and making a map. Well, make a map of your identity. Find the most precious nodes, the gold mines, the most beautiful species of creatures that live on that continent and within your mind. If you have that mindset, you're open-minded, if you're willing to explore, you'll get much more out of the writing process. And it's likely you'll generate an essay that stands out, moves the reader, and helps you to get into your first or second choice college. You do not need to be a good writer to write a good essay. I want to repeat that. Some of the best essays were written by people who did not consider themselves good writers. If you were to read my writing, you would probably be shocked because I write like a fifth grader. Look at the way that I'm writing on the screen here. You do not need to. Very simple, very clear, very effective writing. That's what moves the reader. They're going to spend maybe 90 seconds reading this. So you do not need to make syntactically convoluted sentences. Otherwise, you're likely to frustrate the reader. So don't worry if you don't consider yourself a good writer. That's actually a good sign because then you have fewer concepts about writing. I'll tell you a secret. I got 2 B's in college. Rest were all A's. And one of those B's was in writing. I never told that to anyone before. Maybe I did, but I never said it publicly. And the reason I got a B is because I was arrogant. Because I went into my freshman composition class thinking like I knew more than the teacher. The teacher was young, and I thought, well, I'm a decent writer. I can write better than he can. And instead of just being vulnerable and following the rubric, I followed my own plan and I suffered accordingly. That was an important life lesson that I learned. That when you enter this process, don't hold on to your ego. Be willing to set that aside and say, okay, can I express my ideas in more simpler terms? Can I use verbs that are more active? Can I just break down these large concepts that I want to convey into simple bite-sized increments? And then you can polish them and weave them into a wonderful tapestry later. The best essays aren't necessarily the best written essays. They're the ones that reveal the most about your identity. The next thing I would like to suggest before you start writing is to brainstorm. Brainstorming is the most effective way to look at yourself honestly. And I'm going to give you an example here about how I brainstorm. Before I do so, I want to show you that the more that you chronicle your psychology, your worldview, your hopes, your aspirations, on paper as a mind map, the more you do that, do all that pre-work, the more effectively you can then pick and choose which topics from that mind map you would like to convey in your larger essay. Too many students jump right in and start writing rather than doing the prerequisite brainstorming. So if you look at my curriculum, The Art of Essay, I spend 36 pages asking students questions in brainstorming format. For 36 pages, I brainstorm with students. They're like, they often say, Mr. Durst, why can't we just get to the writing? And I tell them, you are doing the writing. The brainstorm is your essay. The paragraph format is just the expression of your brainstorm. And these are the types of questions I ask. This is right from my curriculum. I ask a page after page after page of questions that are designed to help the student brainstorm about their identity, to help them answer the questions: who am I? How did I get this way? And who do I desire to be? Each of the questions is designed to do that. So this is an example of how I brainstorm. I put my name in the middle of the page. This is like the initial brainstorming process, where I say, okay, so-and-so, please write your name in the middle of the page. Okay. Then I ask them, I say, why don't you start to write about key aspects of your identity that you feel pertain to you? So here I am, I call myself the Wordmuse, right? Why? I love language. I write poetry. I write fiction. I'm interested in mnemonics. I'm interested in helping people fall in love with language just as I have. So that's one part of my identity. I'm also a mentor. I help people in coaching, and I help people with essays. I'm an artist. Each day I create some digital art. I create content, videos like I'm doing now, post on Instagram, but also I'm a serious student of life. When I'm not creating content, I'm looking for new ideas that pertain to renewable energy and to cognition. That's one of my areas of interest: how we learn, how we encode new information, pattern recognition. And I watch a interesting YouTube channel called The Behavioral Panel. I'm interested in mnemonics, how we remember and encode language. So this is how I would brainstorm. My first day, the first session, I would say in black here, right? Then in red, I ask students to write examples of the points that they brought up. So for example, for fiction, many years ago, a good friend of mine challenged me to write a page a day. At the time I was running a business. This is before I started teaching, so before 9/11. And I said, oh, I'm a writer. I don't need to prove to you. He said, prove it to yourself. So for 365 days, I wrote a page a day in a murder mystery. That transformed my own concept of myself. When I say, who am I? How did I get that way? I went from being a business person to being a writer by that process. So that's how I became who I am today. So that's why I put number one, because it's so important. So number two is, before 9/11, I was in business. I owned a business in the city, New York City. But after 9/11, I figured, what is my purpose? I want to change the direction of my life to help others. And so I became a teacher. So that would be number two. So both of those I can give great examples for. I can make them very powerful. I can show how my identity changed. And number three is, again, I love mnemonics. Each day I try to shoot a video about illustrated mnemonics. I love language. At the front door, when you walk into my house, it says words in calligraphy. I love words. When I say I'm the Wordmuse, I'm telling myself, hi, you are the Wordmuse. Use language to serve, to love, and to attend others. So I go up to so this is how I would ask students to brainstorm. I did this for you to show you exactly the process that I use. Whenever I write anything, a letter to my father, a business letter, I go back to my 5th grade roots and I just map it out on paper. What do I want to say in this poem? What do I want to say in this letter? What are the key points? By mapping it out, then I can go and structure it in paragraph format. So this is another example of a brainstorm about crises in my life. So throughout my curriculum, I ask students about family and friends and joy and love and hope and fear. And one of the key questions that I ask to help them brainstorm is about crises, because I believe that crises shape us more than anything else in our life. Often pain shapes us more than joy. And so indeed, the greatest crisis in my life is my head pain. I've had pain ever since I was a child. But it's made me more empathic and more sensitive so that I don't judge anyone. I assume that everyone is suffering. And I want to be an agent to help relieve that suffering, to help them gain tools so that they can manage their suffering. So, yes, it's a crisis, but that's why I put in red the examples that have arisen, the details that have arisen from that point that I wrote down. I've had financial issues. I've been betrayed by partners because I'm very trusting. And that's one reason also why I'm a teacher. Right around 9/11, I had a major betrayal in my business. And I thought, well, this is not for me anymore. I'd rather be investing my love and my ideas in students rather than trying to sell things. So there's another example. So each of these could be possible topics for an essay. But unless I mapped them out, then I wouldn't know what to write about. I would just start writing, well, there's this. The reader knows whether you've mapped it out or not. They're reading thousands of essays. I read 1,500 essays a year. I know whether a student has pre-structured the essay or if they're winging it. And the college admissions officer will know that as well. Another crisis is I've been isolated. Boarding school, going overseas to help students in the past. But it's made me self-sufficient. And in those moments of isolation, I've learned to write and I've gained comfort from poetry. So each of those points I could write about. Head pain, that'd be a wonderful essay. How it shaped me. I could write about being betrayed in business, how that launched my new purpose and new meaning as a teacher. And I could write about being self-sufficient and being in love with writing because of my being isolated. So all of this is an example of how I brainstorm myself. I only ask students to do what I do because I know it works. And it works each year with student after student. Those who are willing to brainstorm usually write incredible essays. The next thing that I ask students to do to pre-work is be willing to put in the hard work. Let's say you're applying to 20 schools. Well, each school has 2 to 3 supplemental essays. So that's a lot of work that you need to prepare yourself for. Yes, I have students that come to me mid-December who've been out doing other things. They've been busy with research or other things. And they cram in 1 month 60 essays worth of work. And that's generally does not yield the best results. And that leads me to the next point, which is that each why essay, why school, why major essay requires a lot of research. In order for it to be sincere, you need to be a detective. You need to look up Duke, find the department you're interested in, find professors, see what they've written, be willing to reach out to them, write them emails about what they've written. That takes months. A sincere and diligent research project takes time, and consider each of these essays as just such a project. And that's why I urge students to create a workflow. Use whatever spreadsheet you're comfortable with. I still use Excel. I'm still back in the 80s. And create, okay, this is what I need to do this week. This school. On your spreadsheet, I recommend you put every school, put every prompt, because many of the prompts are the same. There are many schools that ask about community. There are many schools that ask about an extracurricular activity. There are many schools that ask about a setback or a challenge, right? And most schools will have some form of the why school or why major essay. So create the school when it's due, the prompts, and then create week by week. I often start students with Yale and Stanford because Yale has so many small essays, and so does Stanford. And it allows students to write about the why school, the why major, the activities, their intellectual interests, so they can get a little bit of information out. Just brainstorm about all of the key topics. And then they can hone those and change those over time. But that's where I usually start. But it's really up to you, whatever your first choice school, whatever you're applying early decision. So those are the key points that I ask students to prepare before they meet me. And I ask you to think about being open-minded, being willing to explore your internal world like a cartographer, being willing to brainstorm in a sincere manner, do research, and create a workflow. If you prepare in that manner, you're very likely to create an excellent essay, and more importantly, you're very likely to grow a great deal through the process. Grow your understanding of yourself. Grow your understanding of what it means to be human, what your goals are, and the factors that have shaped you, and how you want to change in the future. You'll change immensely if you're willing to go through this diligent pre-work throughout the entire process. I want to thank you for joining me today. My name is Chaim Durst, and I am the Wordmuse.